So as I'm climbing out over the mountains, over the clouds, the engine quits. I bought a Comanche 250 out of Utah, Morgan County, Utah. And it was quite an adventure after I bought it. I thought it was going to be great because I bought my first plane. I really wanted to get it home, started working on it because it's in rough shape. It sat in Utah for about 20 years on the ramp, nonetheless. But Utah is a pretty dry climate, so it helped. But I had made a couple trips up there via airline while I was working at a maintenance shop in Lockhart. And I'd fly out of Austin. I had a friend flying for Southwest, so he gave me a couple buddy passes to get out to Morgan County to work on it. And I am an AMP-IA, so I was doing all the work myself out there in Utah. And actually, I was an AMP at the time. So I had an IA out there helping me certify it for get the annual done and everything. But there was a lot of ADs that I had to comply with because there was no AD record. So I went out, did a lot of the work in a guy's hangar, a borrowed hangar. A guy up there actually let me stay with him for a couple nights, which was super nice. And but I had the plane completely torn apart in his hangar. The tail of the Comanche has an AD on it, and you have to remove the whole tail in order to comply with that AD. So I had the whole tail off of this plane. Control cables disconnected, everything. Had it apart, did the dye penetrant inspection. Put it all back together. After like 3 or 4 trips out there, I finally got it airworthy. And my dad actually came out there with me one time to help do some landing gear related stuff that needed 2 people. And I think he wanted to make a trip out of it too. So it was just a fun road trip out to Utah. But we finally got all the 80s and stuff. We got some 5-gallon cans from the nearest airport because they didn't have fuel at the airport. And we had, I think, 4 cans, so it's like 20 gallons total. It was meant to just get me out to the next airport. And so I think we filled it up that day and then decided not to go just because of weather or something. So I went back to Austin, worked another week, and went back the next weekend without anybody. It was just me. It had just snowed. The runway was cleared, though. They had plowed it. And I was like, all right, today's the day. I'm going to fly home. And so I get in the plane, I do a couple high-speed taxis. First high-speed taxi, got up decent speed, made sure everything was still good and the engine was running good and stuff. And I did another one, and I actually broke the ground. Like, I came off the ground without intending to, and I was like, whoa. And then I landed it back down, and I was like, okay, everything seems to be working good. And, in my mind, planning before I got there, I wanted to do like a couple laps in the pattern. I just wanted to stay near the airport. But this airport was surrounded by mountains, and there's really I didn't feel comfortable really doing laps because I was just so close to the mountains. I don't have any mountain flying experience. And keep in mind, I'm less than 100 hours at this point, I think, when I went to go buy my first airplane, which is a Comanche 250, a 250 horsepower, complex plane. Looking back, it's all just, I was like, you're dumb. but I finally go out there anyways. I was going to do a couple laps. That's what I had in my mind. And I took off, started climbing out, and I saw the valley, or where I was headed towards, the clouds were like towards the top of the mountains. I didn't think those were going to be an issue. I was just going to go into those in the valley. And then I quickly realized that the clouds were a little lower than I anticipated, and I didn't have a whole lot of room to go down because there's the valley. And, high altitudes, airplanes perform a lot different. And I realized that the hard way. I had an idea, but experiencing it was different. And so once I got in the air, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to go. I'm not going to do any, I don't have the fuel to do a bunch of laps in the pattern. So I just started going, climbing out. I didn't know how high I was going to climb. I was just climbing to get away from the clouds. And I finally got above the clouds, still climbing. And then I realized the clouds are coming up too. So I kept climbing, and I don't have oxygen. And so I knew I needed to go up and then come back down as soon as I could. But that wasn't an issue because the plane wanted to come down anyways. So one of the tanks had a lot less fuel in it than I thought, and I ended up running that tank dry. So as I'm climbing out over the mountains, over the clouds, the engine quits. And I do a 180-degree turn. And what's funny is... when it happened, a lot of people would start cussing, like freaking out. And when it happened, I literally was just like, well, and I pitched down, and I was like, all right, let's just figure this out. And in my mind, after doing all that work over the weeks, hundreds of things could have gone wrong. My first thought was not fuel. I was thinking my mags quit. I'm thinking my P-lead busted off or whatever. It's just anything. But lots of things were going through my mind. So I kind of calmed down and did a 180-degree turn. I was headed towards the valley because I knew that's the only place I really had to land. Pointed the plane. Fly the plane. That's the first thing you do. And I think my training kicked in, and it made me turn around without thinking about anything else. I just turn around. And finally started fiddling with stuff, and I finally just switched the tank over, hit the boost pump, and it fired right back up. And as soon as it fired up, I was like, 180-degree out. I'm getting out of here. And I was far enough away from Morgan County Airport, I wasn't going to go back. So I headed due west, through the valley, finished getting through the valley. I was clear, it was flat land. And I saw that the nearest airport was Carbon County Airport. And if you've flown into Carbon County Airport, you know there's a cliff on the approach going east. Yeah. And I was thinking the whole time, like, this one tank that I have left, my other tank's dry. I have one tank left. I don't know how much fuel is in it. I don't want to trust the gauge. So the whole time I'm thinking, this engine's going to quit. I'm going to run out of fuel. I'm going to go right in that cliff. Or I'm going to have to turn around. I'm like thinking, okay, do I have time to turn around and land somewhere flat? Or do I have to try to make the runway and hit the cliff? And those are my options. And I just kept flying, it kept running, luckily. And I landed. Everything was fine. Pulled up to the FBO and got fuel. And then I just sat for an hour and a half because I wanted to calm down, But after getting fuel, I think I filled it up with close to my usable fuel, which I don't know the exact amount. I think I probably have the receipt somewhere, but it was very close to the usable fuel of the plane. So all that said, it was very close, I would say. It could have ended a lot worse, and I realized that. But anyways, I got fuel, took off. All right, I calmed down. I got fuel. Talked to the FBO person there. They were working. I needed somebody to talk to. But I took off, started heading west again, and Comanche has 4 hours of range with reserve. So about a 4-hour trip, nothing runs wrong. Airplane ran perfectly. And this trip was taking a little bit longer than I thought because of all this stuff that was happening. I waited at Carbon County a little longer. So by the time I got to Albuquerque, there was a flying community just south of Albuquerque that I flew into because they had the cheapest gas. That's the only reason I went. There was actually an airport just south of there and I'll get to that, but I could have gone to that one. But anyways, it was dark by the time I got there. So luckily all my lights and stuff were working. That's a big plus. But I got there. I couldn't really find the airport because the lights weren't working. I had the frequency. I was clicking that mic. Nothing was happening. So I keyed up on Albuquerque approach. I was already talking to them because I was on flight following. But I told them, I was like, hey, I can't see the airport. I think I'm circling where it should be. And he was like, okay, and I was like, I don't think the runway lights are working. And Albuquerque approach was like, hey, okay, let me talk to the airport manager at the flying community. And I'm like, all right, I'll just be chilling here with who knows how much fuel. And he calls the airport manager and he says, hey, I kept keying it, the whole time I was just keying the mic, just trying to get the lights to work. And Albuquerque approach finally came back and said, hey, they got the lights working. And so sure enough, I clicked the mics a little bit more and the lights started coming up so I could see it. And so I was like, all right, that's where I'm going. So I came down, I descended a little bit more. At this point, I'm going to put my gear down. I go to put my gear down. It goes about halfway. I hear the motor going. It's like, ring, 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 and then it just quits. Breaker trips. Gear is stuck halfway down. I'm freaking out. It's like, what the heck? It's nighttime. My gear's not working. I'm just circling here. I don't know how much fuel I have. And so I keyed up the mic, Albuquerque approach. Hey, I'm having issues with my gear. I'm going to have to circle a little bit more. And he's like, all right, that's fine. Just try to figure it out. So I'm still circling. I know the systems real well. So I knew like where to troubleshoot, what could go wrong with the Comanche gear. And a big problem with the Comanche gear is the gear cables. They get corroded sometimes. They build up a lot of friction, and the motor can't push it, and the circuit breaker trips. Anyways, I felt underneath where all the circuit breakers are on the Comanche. I found the propped one. It was a gear breaker, and I grabbed on the Comanche. It has a bar that goes up and down, no matter if you're in manual mode or you're letting it down electrically. And there's a bar that goes up and down, so you can grab that bar and help the motor relieve the strain on the motor. So I did that. I reset the breaker and then pushed it with my hand. And it went down, luckily. Everything came down, green light and everything. Everything's locked. So we're good there. And then I was like, all right, so I'm going to try to land. I told Albuquerque Approach, I'm good. And I started talking to just local traffic, doing my typical pattern calls and stuff. And at this point, the airport manager, and along with like 2 or 3 other people, were out watching me because they were like, all right, this is a show, I want to see something go down. And I'm sitting here sweating, they're they're probably enjoying the show. But I finally go down and line up on final, and at this point I realized the wind is kicking pretty hard. And I was having to correct a lot, and at some points I was just running out of rudder because I was trying to crab and just correct for it so I wouldn't get blown off the runway. And I was finding that I was running out of rudder to keep the plane straight, and I couldn't keep it, and it was just blowing me off the runway. So I had to do a couple go-rounds. So the first go-round was because, like, all right, I know where the winds are going now. And keep in mind, this flying community, the airport, the runways, it's not even as wide as my wingtips. Like, I don't have much to work with. It's ridiculous. And so I do a go around, and the guys on the ground are talking to me with a handheld. They're like, hey, the wind's pretty crazy. There's a lot of rotors. Just be aware. And I was like, all right. So I come down again. The second time, I get a lot closer to the runway. I start hovering in ground effect, and the plane's just getting kicked around like crazy. And again, I got down into the rotors this time, and I was just getting bounced around. And at one point, I literally thought I lost rudder control because I couldn't control it. It was just going like this. It's just swinging around. So I did another go around, and the third time I was like, you know what, I'm going to land here. If this doesn't work, I'm going to the other one. I have to, and I didn't know how much fuel I had because I was circling for a long time because the runway lights weren't. But third time I came in, still kicking me around. I lined up a little right of the runway because I knew it was going to blow me into it. And I corrected as much as I could to keep the plane straight. And as soon as I got down in the ground effect, I was like just right of center line. And then it pushed me over a little bit, and I set it down. The plane still wanted to fly a little bit, but I was like, nope, you're staying on the ground because I need to steer. And so I held it there and dropped the flaps, or pulled the flaps up, kill lift, and then I just coasted out. And luckily, the tires had enough grip to keep me on the runway. But finally, I rolled out, and oh, this is the funniest part. I rolled out. The guy's talking to me on the handheld the whole time. And he's like, hey, you just follow me. I'm in the white truck. You can stay at my house tonight. And I was like, all right, cool. I don't have to worry about where I'm staying tonight. And I follow him to his house. We hop out. We pull the plane in. And we park it in his little ramp area. He has some tie downs. Tie it down. His neighbor comes over. He hands me a beer. He was like, hey, here, you need this. And I was like, oh, thanks. I took it, popped it open. I was like, I'm drinking this. But it was, after that, it was a wonderful experience. It was horrible leading up to it, but after that, it was great. I met some really cool people. He actually fed me dinner that night. He let me sleep in his house, woke up in the morning, rested, talked for a little bit, and then I headed out, got fuel and headed out.